Thanks, Tony.
In the future, talk radio will actually educate, inspire, and make you think. The future is now. Topics and music that affect your life from Universal Broadcasting Network. Tune in at ubnradio.com.
Gotta watch that applause card. Hey folks, you've tuned into Dr. Judy, WTF, which of course this week is What the Freud. I'm your host, Walt Lusk, and in studio, as we're thrilled to have, as usual, Dr. Judy Rosenberg. You have turned into the #1 show on Channel 2 here at UBN Radio, and you can catch us on Stitcher, iTunes, and we really love all the comments and subscribes you've gotten on YouTube, and we're adding more shows all the time, so thanks for viewing and your comments. It is sponsored by the Psychological Healing Center. We have centers all over the world. If you can hear this voice, you can do therapy with Dr. Judy and all of our therapists at the Psychological Healing Center, or you can actually visit her and get on the couch with her, and Beverly Hills as well as Sherman Oaks. And you can write us. We're at info@drjudywtf.com. And lastly, later in the show, we will shrink a song. This is a really cool song. It's kind of a country one. I've always wanted to do one. And this is a call-in show, so if you want to call us, you can get on the couch, and lines are open at area code 323-843-2826. And we're kind of continuing our series on parenting, kind of, sort of, aren't we? We did a couple of shows on parents, and we're doing kids and divorce.
Just a natural outgrowth of the topics we've been on. And we're going to talk about the effects of divorce on children, and we'll get into litigious divorces.
Yeah, contentious divorces, yes.
Yes, contentious, litigious, and what happens in those cases. And this is a call-in show. We do love call-ins.
We do.
And so please do get on the couch with me, with Walt. Double therapy.
No, I'm not going to jump down too much.
You're not?
No, you can do that.
Okay.
One of the bylines of the show is Healing Human Disconnect, which is actually one of the lines of Dr. Judy's world-renowned book, available on Amazon and Nook and Kindle and paperback, entitled Be the Cause, Healing Human Disconnect. And one of the major challenges with that, if I just dive in here real fast, is what we all have, and that's these little ugly little cell phone things. And there's an article that came out a couple days ago about how we really are slaves to our cell phones. In the United States, the average person checks their cell phone, are you ready? 253 times a day.
And who counts that?
They did an interview with about 50 people. They watch that. And, that's about every 15 minutes. I figured it out. And if you're awake for 16 hours a day and you sleep 8, that's about every 15 minutes. Once every 15 minutes.
We talk a lot about attachment theory. I'd like to know if now we can talk about detachment.
No, we're attached to our phones.
Yeah, so I wonder if looking at our phones every few minutes is the same as a mother looking at her baby every few minutes. That would be an interesting study.
No, actually, I have an answer to that.
Yes?
It says here that brain scans have revealed that being hooked on checking your cell phone is, like Facebook and all that, and we'll address that in a second, is the same regions of the brain as being addicted to cocaine.
So basically they created an instrument that plays right into our addictive buttons and feeding the addiction within us, and then they got us.
They do, because, between the latest tweets, the latest announcements from all your closest and most intimate friends on Facebook, or as a friend of mine calls it, Fakebook, and Instagram, which is owned by Facebook, you get little alerts if you put those on. You got news alerts and on stuff. Emails. It's just like, oh my gosh, I'm going to miss out. Really?
Right.
I'll be there tomorrow. Trust me.
Right. And I just want to also announce that our app is ready for the not
Android?
For the Android.
No,
just
the app
for
the app is for iPhones.
iPhones, and download the app, and through the app you can get onto our show.
Yes, you can.
It's a really easy way
and
to
comments
push here, and there we are.
Even excerpts of your book.
and excerpts of the book. You could buy the book through the app, and you can see the mind map on the app and download the Psychological Healing Center's Peaceful Healing Dialogue, which a lot of people request.
We've got one this week.
We have
from info at Dr. Judy WTF.
Okay, very cool.
And the app is at the App Store, Psychological Healing Center. Mm-hmm. Not psychological, it's psychological.
Psychological? Okay. And psychological. So today we are going to talk about how divorces make people psycho and how they make children psycho. And there's no such a thing as a good divorce, because divorces, by virtue of the fact that they are divorces, leave children with pillars that are split, and that's not a great feeling. If you put the mind map up for people to see.
Yes, and those of you who are just tuning in on Stitcher and iTunes and such, you can go to drjudywtf.com and find it there.
So I talk a lot about
or the app on the iPhone.
I talk a lot about blueprinting, and so when our blueprint from mother's side and blueprint from father's side ingrain into the fiber of our being, and when they support each other, we get a sense of self and a sense of wholeness of the self. And when mother and father split for whatever reasons, those pillars go to other sides, literally. And if you see panel number 4, take a look at panel 4 for those of you who are able to watch the show. What happens to the pillars is that they disintegrate and they fall into chaos, and then all the little people fall off the ladder, and that's what it feels like for the children. It's very destabilizing, and it's very scary for them. And oftentimes one parent will speak badly of the other parent, and this
we're going to talk about
go on and on for the rest of their lives. And it's hard not to do, because one thing that happens is that parents may not want to see each other, but they'll always have to see each other because they have a common bond, unless one takes off, of course. So I know you pulled a lot of information off the web. And
when we talk about divorce, divorce hurts children, even grown ones.
Okay.
As you alluded to. Children, even intelligent ones or older ones, often think it's their fault. There's a lot of self-blame. Grades suffer. You can lose motivation, and studying is down. So the thing is that I lost my entire extended family, grandparents, beloved grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins. Divorce hurts children, and it hurts them immediately in the short term, but of course there's long-term ramifications for us adults. It even has long-term consequences, as I say here. I went into marriage knowing I could leave. Statistical studies indicate that children of divorce are more likely to divorce themselves. They figure there's always an exit strategy. They're also cautious about trusting others because they know that they can leave. Parental divorce affects children's future relationships. My parents' divorce still affects me today, many decades later, as the writer wrote, and this is from a lady. It affects me as a child. It affects my marriage. It affects me today. There's no such thing as I talked about intelligent divorce. My parents' divorce had lifelong effects on me that I'm still feeling.
Yeah, not surprising. So I have a lot of people in my practice who are families, and one of the things that we work very hard on at the Psychological Healing Center, my psych assistants, interns, and myself, is that we really do stand for the family. And it's really important to do everything humanly possible to preserve the family, because it has consequences way into the future.
Huge.
I mean, just to give you some idea, when you walk your children down the wedding,
the aisle, down the aisle for the wedding.
Yes, the aisle.
Mm-hmm.
Then instead of mom and dad walking the child down the aisle, you're going to have extended families there that may not get along, and the wedding day may not be as wonderful for that grown adult child now, and these feelings are going to within the child surface.
Yes, resurface.
Few months of the relationship. And it's just very, very stressful all along. What do I call my in-laws and my outlaws, and what happens if people talk badly about each other, and what happens during holiday times. And, this is a pretty big ball of wax. So if possible, you just don't want to go there. And to not go there, you want to pick a partner that is right. Pick a partner who has what I call relationship grip. And by that I mean the ability to sustain a relationship. And so people who are able to sustain relationships, for the most part, they're not high on addictions, and they're pretty much able more or less to soothe themselves, not perfectly. They usually have higher ethics. They're givers on some level, because you can't have a relationship unless you have a we. And there's the prevention. The prevention is to have as much mental health as possible before you have children, so you don't visit your issues on the children, and that you don't create families that trickle down multi-generationally into chaos and then breakdowns and divorce. So go ahead, Walt. I know you have a plethora.
Well,
of
remember, folks, this
today.
is a call-in show. So if you have issues, even as an adult, of divorce, feel free to call us. The number is 323-843-2826. Or if you have an issue that you want to talk about that you don't want to call on, you can write us at info@drjudywtf.com. The price kids pay when parents go through a bitter divorce. Now, this is for younger children, but it does have ramifications on the long run. Many times school impacts, right? They have lower school grades. They have lower social development. They could develop a lower achievement in college just because of the grief and the pain that they go through, depending upon when the divorce occurs. Higher risk of anxiety, stress, and low self-esteem. Higher frequency in health problems. They are twice as often divorced when they get married to divorce. And if they marry someone who is also from a divorced home, they have even 3 times of a higher divorce rate. And lastly, they have a 5-year shorter lifespan many times because of the eroding overall constitutional strength and probably emotional support that they're not getting as a result of the families together. So the ramifications are far and wide.
Right. And you mentioned how school grades drop,
Yes.
which is one way that we as psychotherapists, psychologists can tell that things are not going well at home. Children will act out, and so oftentimes what they will do is they will become the identified patient or the problem child, so that the parents can rally around them,
And they'll get attention,
stomach aches, and then of course the parents have to get together to talk about it or at least communicate. And so children will do just about anything to keep that bond between the parents going, and they always, as you said, think it's their fault. Why did mommy and daddy get a divorce? Because I was a bad boy and I misbehaved and they fought about me. And so this theme is just reverberating in childhood, because children are egocentric in that they think that the world revolves around them, and not in a good way necessarily. They think that they are the cause of the outcome of even their parents' life. And so they feel a real sense of responsibility when parents divorce, and really take it upon themselves to believe that they're the cause of this mess.
Yes, and oftentimes it's not, but that's what they feel, that's what they see. Mommy and daddy are now separated, they're not together, and I was part of this family, and now we're not a family anymore.
Right, and then there are layers and layers, and then of course there are siblings, and some parents will favor one sibling over the other. I just had a case today where my patient told me that daddy left with brother and he stayed with mother, and I've had other patients where they need to leave the country and they can only take one child with them.
Oh,
and
wow.
So imagine what
ramifications
that has on a human being.
I don't even want to comprehend that one.
I mean, that, and then you get core beliefs around that from the child that was left behind, like I'm worthless.
That's almost as bad as Sophie's Choice.
Yeah, well, there's lots of real Sophie's Choice situations out there, and so then I have to deal with the chaos and the horrific outcome on self-esteem from this. So it's a serious business. Again, the prevention is to pick right and to create a family system. If you don't have a good family system to role model from, then you need to consult people on how to get it right. And so sometimes it's better even if you get that role modeling from an aunt or an uncle or an older friend or grandparents or whoever looks to you like they've got their act together in terms of being a support system to each other.
But along the lines of the fact that in the event there is a divorce, because over 50% of us are going to get divorced first go around. I think the numbers are even 56%. And then I've heard one statistic lately that it's probably higher because some families just can't afford to get divorced, or they're unable to get divorced, maybe because they don't want to be together, but they don't want to goof up the medical benefits, or they can't afford it, or other issues.
Yes,
but
there are many financial issues.
There are.
Play here.
There are. And there's some big mistakes parents make, and I wanted to touch on those because those of you who are divorced, take these to heart and take them seriously. The first is bad mouthing the other parent. Your children love you both. They need to feel that you are friendly and respectful toward each other as opposed to trying to put them in the middle, right? It's an emotional nightmare for them to defend the parent being berated. Sadly, that puts them in a double bind because by coming to one's defense, they feel they're taking sides and turning their back on the other. Children need love and to be loved by both parents, and this ruins that ability. They think highly of both parents, and they don't want to have any bad thoughts about either of them.
It gets really complicated because when one child actually sees a parent I'm being extreme, hit another parent, then, I have this ethical principle that I refer to as principles over people. Principles over people. And it doesn't matter who that person is. If they fall on the side of principles that is unethical, immoral, cruel, inhumane, then you have to call the person to the mat, and you cannot support that individual. And the sad thing is with children, as you said, they want to love both parents, but what do you do when you see daddy hitting mommy? Do you still want to play with daddy after that? You see? Or if you see mommy having an affair with another man, how is that going to impact your feelings about your own mother? And then how will that impact your understanding of how your father might not really like mom after something like that? So it's super, super complicated. And what I find is that people repress a lot of their feelings because childhood is a
hostage situation and they bury it deep down. The solution they suggest, which is very obvious, but easier said than done, is bite your tongue. Mm-hmm. Take the emotional high road and put your children first. Vent to a friend, not to your children.
Right, and that is part of the dilemma of very difficult marriages.
Yes.
This is something that I see in my practice a lot, and I was just talking about this today, where the child was playing counselor to the parent, so that therefore, if the parents divorce, right, then the child feels even more responsible.
Because the therapy didn't work.
Right, and one of the old models of therapy used to be the parent-child-adult model, transactional analysis. And so parents have to be parents and adults. So when the child starts taking the role of the parent and the adult, it throws the entire family system out the window. The pillars fall. The children no longer feel safe, and there's just no authoritative.
We're authoritarian and authoritative.
Thank you. I keep forgetting the difference, but
authoritarian is really a control, and authoritative is the best way to look at it, really, I found, is to be feared or revered. Authoritarian is basically ruling by fear, and then authoritative is earning the trust and being revered by the children.
Right, and so when children start playing role of parent or adult, then the parents are no longer revered.
Correct.
And so there goes the pillars, the sense of safety, and the feeling that parents are the boss and have control of the family.
And as I said, as a joke many times, raising parents is really hard work for those that are together. The second is, along these lines, is misplaced resentment. A nasty divorce can lead to feeling very bitter. The feelings you have towards your ex must not be transferred to your children.
Hard to do.
Very hard to do. Perhaps your partner is a very organized type A, and you fought about being too messy and how they were always late. Now you have to find the child who has these same personality characteristics. Now your kid is nagging you to get moving because he or she doesn't want to be late for school, and you explode because you've got all this resent built up against your ex, and now you're taking out your kid.
And this is the most sad situation when the parent resents the ex and projects all the anger onto the child. You look just like your father. I hate your guts.
That was exactly the next thing I'm going to say here is some physical similarities of some parent looking like your ex may add to the drama.
Yeah,
exactly.
So sad.
Yeah.
And so this is multi-generational. And so what I also find is that sometimes the safer parent will take the hit. Because if there's one parent who abandons the family or doesn't show up that much, then that parent becomes the, quote, precious parent, and you don't want to upset that person anymore because the love bond is already so strained that you don't dare talk back to that person. You don't dare hold them responsible for their behavior because you're so scared that they'll never come home again, or they'll never, they'll never call you again.
They'll abandon you all over again.
They'll abandon you. Yeah. So who gets the brunt of it is the person who's safe. And so I will deal with mothers who talk to me about how their children treat them so horrendously and treat their ex-husband or the other party so well, and I have to go through this explanation with them until they understand. Oh, I get it. Okay, so I'm the
and let's hope it's not too late.
So they don't take it as harshly.
So recognize your triggers and breathe. One thing to keep in mind is, as far as your children is concerned, you really are bigger than they are. And I mean that in two senses, physically and emotionally. So you want to keep that in mind. Your child is not your ex. So don't live in the past and project all that into the future, because it really will be a mill of a hess.
And it is so important to have a support system when you get a divorce, because when you don't have that support system, what happens, especially with mothers and sons, is that there's it doesn't have to only be with mothers and sons, but an enmeshment takes place, and then that little son becomes kind of like
the little big man.
The little husband, okay, or the little wife, or the roles get very, very, very distorted, and then this codependency forms, and the child does not have the emotional bandwidth to handle all of this, and the parent, because the parent is hurting, just keeps loading and loading the emotions onto the child until the child breaks, and then the child can start developing their own defense mechanisms, drinking a little more and smoking a little more and acting out a little bit more and being more promiscuous so on. So, so this is just not a pretty outcome.
How about using the children as a pawn for manipulation? I know this is a real
Often
popular one. If parents still want to wreak havoc on each other, using the children as pawns is very effective. They can take many forms and have them deliver messages to the other parent. You tell your mother that if she thinks I'm giving up my week of custody, so she can go see her parents, forget about it. Or her boyfriend, right? Forget about it. Right. So communicate directly through the lawyer, or maybe, you can do through email, and obviously that's tough because a lot of stuff can be thrown back and forth. But stop and ask yourself what your motivation is.
There's this new system. I'm trying to think. There's a court email system. I forget the name of it. It's not coming to me.
Is that here in California?
Now. Yeah, that you can send your emails back and forth to each other. It's court monitored so that you can't really.
Do they filter it?
Oh yeah, they filter it so that everything is evidence and recorded and so on. I forgot the
It'll
name.
come to you.
It'll come to me.
Wow.
So that's one way to handle it, so that you don't get too out of emotional control, because everything is recorded, and then the judge should, it can be used as testimony against you, right? So.
How about ruining special events? Because obviously, as a family, there's going to be that wedding or, anniversary or birthday or some event, right? I mean, negating Christmas and Thanksgiving and such. Children pine for the day when their parents will see them sing in the choir, perform in a school play, make it to the hockey playoffs, or have some special bat or bar mitzvah. Children want their parents in attendance for all their special milestones.
Right.
Don't ruin your children's opportunity to make a special childhood memory because you and your ex just can't be in the same room together.
Right. So it takes a huge level of maturity for parents to keep it together. If they need to sit on separate ends of the auditorium, that's fine too. And the instrument of communication just popped into my mind. It's called the Wizard.
The Wizard.
So for those of you who want to lower your reactivity and send messages to your ex without getting heavy-handed, you can use this particular instrument.
Or without them getting heavy-handed.
You can get heavy-handed, but it's going to all be recorded, so it's not going to look too good for you. Right.
So remember that children are also very sensitive to reactions, whether it be facial tone or body language. They just look for clues, and I call them God's little spies. They see everything. So how to fix that? Well, the best way is fake it till you make it.
Right.
That's all you can do.
Right, and there are so many layers of this. People have to split their homes, of course, and so there's daddy's house, there's mommy's house. Children have to go back and forth between the two homes. What do they do if they leave their favorite shoes behind, their favorite toy behind? Some parents solve this by buying 2 sets of clothes and 2 sets of toys and so on and so forth, ideally. If there must be a divorce, it would be best if the families lived relatively close to each other. It does not always work out that way. And then there's the issue of the new people in your children's life. That mommy doesn't like daddy's girlfriend because she looks like a hoe, okay? or
she's like 20 years younger or something.
Right, 20 years younger, right? And 40 pounds thinner. So that's going to bring up some
there you
feelings. Go. Or the new dude is a lot richer than the old dude. And so...
Yeah, the minivan's been turned into a Corvette.
Right, so that's going to bring up feelings. And then the new people in the children's lives are going to try to win over their attention. Or the other side of the coin is they may not care very much about their
they're more withdrawn.
Their new boyfriends or their new spouse's children. And so that becomes a sad situation, because when it's your own child, oftentimes, and not always, people have a little bit more tolerance. But when it's somebody else's child, again, the emotional bandwidth starts getting a little bit narrower. So the list just goes on.
It's
and
fast.
on, right? And
then one more here is letting guilt hijack your ability to parent. Because now you feel guilty because the family's broken up. And every parent wants to be in good setting and enforce appropriate limits and boundaries, but they can suddenly feel overwhelmed and need to show more love and leniency in their discipline just strictly out of guilt. It's harder to crack down on bedtimes and keep the kids on top of things and ensure that their chores are done when you obviously have this tremendous need to apologize for the mess you've made.
Right.
And in their lives.
Right.
So, remind your kids that, they'll survive divorce, you'll survive divorce if they have a sense of post-divorce stability that comes from constant parenting rules. But be gentle on yourself. You don't want to, as I say, you don't want to should on yourself, SHOULD.
So we talk a lot about the multi-generational transmission process, the blueprint, the cause behind our emotional wounds. And so when we watch our parents get divorced, and we come from families that are, in general, not so nurturing, not that functional, where daddy doesn't nurture the nurturer, usually mommy, and when the trickle down doesn't get to the kid and doesn't trickle down far enough or enough, then the outcome is that the child is going to experience that emotional wound. And so in families that eventually, parents that eventually get divorced, obviously there was a problem to begin with. And so on a multi-generational note, these children are going to blueprint off of these dysfunctional parents unless they bust the system. And so it's so important for children to eventually get some kind of therapy so that they don't, as they say, chip off the old block, a blueprint off the old DNA. You don't want it to happen. And so these core beliefs and these dysfunctional patterns need to be dismantled so that they don't visit the future of that child's life in the form of dysfunctional relationships that they will repeat into their lives.
And when you talk about divorce, articles talk about the fact that literally the first couple of years, the first 2 years of the divorce are a little bit more critical because, things are just a little bit on edge. You're trying to figure things out. Mm-hmm. The children want to know, hey, are you guys really done? Can you get back together? Right. And other issues. So the first 2 years are very, very critical. And this period often marked mood swings, abnormal behavior patterns, poor mental health and physical health as well. Mm-hmm. So, which can be what we've talked about, lower self-esteem, hard time to getting along with their peers, and, there's other challenges as well.
And you have to think best interest of the children. I have a wonderful person in my practice who knows that his ex is not going to necessarily be all that attentive to the children. So what he's decided to do is just commit to making lunch for those children and preparing things in advance for the children and remembering birthdays for the children without necessarily, maybe with some resentment that the other person is doing it, but without the feeling that, I'll just do my share, and if she doesn't do her part, well, that's her problem. He's just kind of taking it on as, I'm the protector of my children, so if she doesn't do her share, I'm just going to do double my share. And what a wonderful attitude.
That's picking up the slack.
This individual. Yeah.
You're tuned into Dr. Judy WTF, which is What the Freud. I'm your host, Walt Lusk, here at UBN Radio Network with Dr. Judy Rosenberg. Show sponsored by the Psychological Healing Center. And you can even learn more about it if you have an iPhone. You can go to your app store and get the Psychological Healing Center app, where you can get little inserts from Dr. Judy's new book, Be the Cause, Healing Human Disconnect, and, of course, our radio shows, and a blog that is growing.
Very much so. A practice that is growing beyond. And
your popularity is forever increasing.
And we do teletherapy, FYI, and we do have a really beautiful staff of people who work on a sliding scale fee basis. I train everyone into the mind map therapy, and unlike traditional therapy, people come in and sign up for 10 sessions, and then after that 10 sessions, they are then psychoeducated into thinking like a shrink.
Think like a shrink.
So that we don't have to continue to put them on the couch for years and years or many months. And then after that, of course, people can come in for follow-up and use those sessions to ingrain the knowledge into the fiber of their being, and then come in for life events, crises that come up, and so forth.
Checkups.
Right. Exactly.
In other words, the system is very, very effective, and you feel results and realize results very quickly, just because of the fact of the system that Dr. Judy's developed and how it's implemented. What I thought I'd talk about a little more here is, in terms of divorce, how can you help your children be better off, or go through and deal with all the stuff that goes on into the divorce as a result of the divorce. And there's several things here, and so the first one is ensure that your child has adequate support. Granted, as Dr. Judy said, they're the pillars, mom and dad, and just because mom and dad didn't get along doesn't mean that the children have to be any more of a victim as a result of that. So it says here that full emotional support of both parents. Watch for any persistent attitudes or behaviors that may indicate that professionals need to get involved. Mm-hmm. Next is learn to co-parent respectfully with your ex. We talked about this, but it's a big deal. When marriage collapses, it rarely folds neatly. But the falling debris of any deliberate launched barbs can hurt your child. You don't have to actually like your ex to develop a respectful co-parenting, but as we've stated here, you're still their parent.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. And and I'm sure and hopefully that both goals of both parents is to raise a very healthy, well-adjusted child. Stay active and healthy together. In other words, you want exercise. Now that you've had this jolt of going through it, you got to take care of yourself. And if you're healthy, it helps you take care of those around you.
And in ideal cases, if you can, have birthday parties where you invite the other side. That's wonderful. There are ideal cases, and then there are not so ideal cases, and the not so ideal cases, unfortunately, exchange their children at the front of the police station. So that happens.
Yes,
too.
It happens a lot.
Right.
Yeah. Encourage the father to get involved, because typically the kids are a little more tied to mom when they're younger. And so whenever the father doesn't care about spending time with the child anymore, that happens a lot, and the women have more control over this. So, be respectful and say, hey, they're still your dad, and we've talked about other issues, but, try and at least have them involved. It maintains a little bit more family-ish time. Okay.
And then there are child custody issues, and unfortunately the court system does not really match always with attachment theory. It's not like the judges are sitting there studying attachment theory before they do their ruling. So obviously newborns need to be spending tons of time, especially if mom is breastfeeding, with the baby. And so dad could see them for a few hours at a time. And as they grow older, the shift should then occur, and it should be built into the system, but it's not built in, and it's often very, very costly and time-consuming to make new custody schedules. And so as the child ages, that child technically should be spending more and more even time with both parents.
Yes.
Right, and that is not usually the case.
Easier said than done from a practical, little logistical, as well as emotional perspective.
Very expensive, because you have to go back to court and you have to file a petition for a request for more custody, and it's a very lengthy and costly process. And I'm surprised that in our day and age we cannot make this more simple and follow more formulaic way
for the kids.
Set
boundaries in your intentions with your child. Post-divorce parents often lean on their children for additional support. This can result in parentification of the child, putting too much responsibility on the child, or turning to the child for comfort. We've talked about this. Right. Let the child be a child. Sometimes the challenge is, latchkey kids. Mom's got to work, dad's got to work, and the kids are done with school, so they're coming home to an empty house.
And so sometimes grandparents can play a really wonderful role, and I know people are working longer these years, and so grandparents may very well be working. But if you are a grandparent, your grandson or granddaughter is divorced and needs your kind, loving attention, be there. Have the kids walk over to your house, and you do the homework with them and play with them, and that's a lifesaver. That's a mental lifesaver for a child.
It is. And lastly, allow your child to maintain emotional neutrality. We've talked about this, and don't manipulate and put them in the middle. That's not their fault that divorce occurred. And so, again, try and make sure there is the least amount of a victim as possible. I know it's easier said than done, but you know what? It really wasn't their fault, so don't stick them in the middle. And even though they think it is.
And so that's why it's so important for them to have as much expression versus repression, which then causes depression, and that depression turns into a lot of issues, and then they start watering down the hole in the soul, and it's a mess. Okay, so I'm talking about when children get deeply into depression, they may turn to drugs, sex, rock and roll, and then the divorced parents have more issues at hand, and who splits rehab and so on. It's not a good situation. So let your children express, and even the ugly feelings. I hate you, Mom. I hate you, Dad. I hate my new life. I wish you guys were together. It's all your fault that my grades are slipping. Just let them say it. There's nothing to defend because they need to get it out.
They do. They have to be able to grieve. And we all grieve in a little differently, and children grieve differently as well, because, again, the two pillars in their life aren't there anymore.
And often what I see is that the woman takes more of a financial hit at times, especially if the man is the breadwinner. And so these shifts can cause chaos and resentment because daddy's buying the children new toys and new cars and new this, that, and mommy can't even afford to take them out for pizza, Chinese food.
I had one lady friend who got divorced, and she called her ex-husband Disneyland Dad.
Yeah.
He's just buying all the toys, all the stuff and everything, and they couldn't do any of that.
Right. At the end of the day, what your children really need is you. So all the toys in the world, all the pizza in the world is not going to cut it. What they really, really need is your eye contact, your attention, your empathy, your interest in them, your interest in their feelings, and that's worth everything in the world.
And remember, a lot of ways young children spell love is Time. Yep. The last few minutes I want to talk about a little bit when going through divorce, a couple of things that you just to be aware of. One is respond, don't react. If you've got a spouse that's sitting jabs all the time, you don't have to swing at every pitch your ex tosses at you. Right. So don't be giving me a knee-jerk reaction. Little chill a little bit and then respond. And it'll calm things down, and the momentum of that whole thing will diminish pretty darn quick. Right. Be consistent. Do your best to make your interactions consistent. Again, you don't want to be emotional and whatnot. You want to kind of be consistent in terms of what you're doing, and that'll pay off huge dividends. Be realistic. Remember, stay focused on what matters most. Not the issue sometimes, but the kid, right? How's it going to impact the children? How you handle conflict and the way you process the issues with your kids, and limiting the energy that you give it. And then you're so flippant emotionally drained, you don't have any energy for your kid.
And that's another thing that changes is that sometimes women or the men are forced to take another job because they can't afford their new living situation. The bills increase. Instead of shared bills, they now have double the bills. So that's another stress on the family as the economic
and one of
stress.
these stresses is, keep your eye on the prize. I mean, things will get better, things will calm down, and so make sure you've got other supports in your life to help you go the distance, because it's not easy. It's not. Trust me, Judy and I know. And it won't get better overnight. Do your best not to impulsively respond to situations that come up. Again, you know what? Take a breath, take a breather. And sometimes it's the issue we've talked about in previous shows, to be proactive versus reactive. You want to respond versus react. I think that's the number one thing here that's a takeaway.
On a more positive note, some divorces are necessary.
Yes.
Some couples are poisonous and create toxic environments, and so when they pull out, the children
are relieved.
Are sometimes relieved,
yeah,
and sometimes children will say that they're happy that mom and dad got divorced because the fighting is over, the domestic violence is over.
Or why is mommy or daddy so sad?
Right.
Right. You're not so sad anymore.
Right. So even though we don't want to go there with people, especially in psychological practice, we don't really like when that road is taken. We've got to do everything possible to help these families connect. Sometimes they just don't.
And that's all the time we have for our show, folks. So if you have any questions, comments, queries, or even some concerns, you can write us at info@drjudywtf.com. And we are now going to do our song. And this one's a little interesting song. It's by Cassadee Pope and is entitled 11. So I'm going to read the lyrics, and then Dr. Judy is going to interpret the song from her psychological and mind map perspective. 7 years old, everything was right. a table for 4 on a Friday night. Didn't see any signs of a dead-end road. By the time I was 10, everything was changing. Fell asleep every night praying, don't know which way to go.
Well, it speaks to the pillars starting to disappear. She's 7, everything's okay, everyone's sitting at the dinner table, and then, no sign of a divorce here. And then time goes, and she's 10 now, and now she's praying that life is going to be okay because things seem to be disintegrating here.
Mama did her best to hide her anger, and I did my best to try and save her.
So there's the codependency, right? And there's the mama repressing and the child picking up her mother's feelings.
Yeah, sensing it and trying to compensate.
Totally, yeah.
I was a little too young and a little too dumb to ever think the day would come when Dad would drive away and take his love with him. So I grew up fast in a whole new world, waved goodbye to that little girl. I can see her now, innocent and 7. I wish I had never turned 11.
Well, 11 was not a good year because that was the year, it seems like, that everything went dark. And so she had to grow up really quickly, and she's still grieving the fact that her dad drove away with somebody else. It wasn't her mother.
No, it wasn't Mom.
No.
We moved into a smaller house. How Mama did it, oh, I don't know how. Never went to bed without eating. At 13, I finally realized what it means to get on with your life. Well, let's see again, there's those 2 years. Well, Daddy sure did, and he made it look easy.
Yeah, well, it looks like Mom got strapped with the smaller house and the burden of raising the kids, and he drove off and looked like he was having fun.
Mama did her best to hide the struggle, and I did my best to stay out of trouble. I was too young and a little too dumb to ever think the day would come when Dad would drive away and take his love with him. So I grew up fast in a whole new world, waved goodbye to that little girl. I could see her now, innocent and 7. I wish I'd never turned 11. I wish I could turn back the time and tell myself it'll be all right. You're never going to lose the light in your eyes.
Well, the light is the hope, and then the darkness of that things can't be turned around ever again. Right.
It is now impossible to put that toothpaste back in the tube.
Right.
Yeah. Because I was a little too young and a little too dumb to ever think the day would come. So I grew up fast in a whole new world, waved goodbye to that little girl. I can see her now, innocent and 7. I wish I'd never turned 11.
Right.
And that is our song, folks. And she was just a preteen even. Didn't even get to be a teenager without her mom and dad together. So that's a Cassadee Pope, and the song is entitled 11. So again, thanks for tuning in. Thank you so much for listening. Thanks for your comments. Thanks for liking us on Facebook. And
for downloading the app for the Psychological Healing Center, just download it off your app store, Psychological Healing Center.
And if you have any issues or challenges and you really want to deal with the fact that, you know what, you're still grieving, and it's okay because your parents divorced, Dr. Judy and the Psychological Healing Center can definitely give you a hand. And it's quicker than you think. All you got to do is email us at info@drjudywtf.com or go to drjudywtf.com or write us. And health is closer and easier than you think. I'm your host, Walt Lusk. Thank you so much. With Dr. G. Rosenberg, we're going to close out with our song. Until next time, God bless everyone.